Dad, is that you?
In the flesh, kid.
The clock will start as soon as the tape ends. Good luck, Captain. Consider this your 48-hour Halloween. Welcome to Capfall.
Well, he was right about one thing. I'm not sure if my heart is in this anymore. I don't want to go through another spawn year again. Even 48 hours. Even decent material. Like, not again. What else am I supposed to do? I mean, I've tried that force field. There's no getting through that. And even if there is a way around it, if I wait even an hour before I make a decision, that decision's going to be made for me. Which means I can't waste my time trying to figure out how to escape unless I resign myself to losing all my stuff and not having the channel anymore if the guy's telling the truth. I mean, I don't know who the guy on the tape is. I guarantee you whoever's upstairs is a clone. I can tell Dan Torrey's work when I see it. I mean, Captain Logan was a dead giveaway, but still, I mean, he's not just some imposter. That's definitely a clone. But I mean, the guy on the tape, he could be anything. He seemed like future guy from Enterprise. I mean, what if he was me from the future? I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing seems impossible. One of my best friends can teleport things and clone people. I mean, he could be from the future. He could be from an alternate dimension. He could be a clone himself. Anything is possible. But my worry is that it is Dan. And he said he's a disgruntled fan who's not happy with what I'm doing now. I'm phoning it in. I mean, what if Dan's gone insane? Speaking from experience, it can happen to any of us. I certainly got pretty close in spawn year. Arguably, it did happen. I mean, I'd like to think I came back from it, but... Dan, man, I told you not to clone me. Well, I don't have any more time to lose. I've got to get started on this Knightfall thing. I'm going to document everything. I'm going to keep a camera running all the time. I've got the SD cards. Just know that what you're watching right now is not a recreation of events this time. The spawn year you saw was an interpretation of what I went through, but this is happening right now as I speak. I could just wait it out. I could sit around and play video games or watch Star Trek or read comics. He's right that I'm going to have to be Batman in order to get through this. It's why I'm keeping this get-up on, just for motivation. I mean, I think I have to do that. I mean, those are kind of my choices, right? Like, be Batman or enjoy my stuff while I have it. And I'd kind of like to, but he's out there right now. And I gotta go to work. Well, here we are again. So 48 hours. No sleep, nothing but tuna, Mountain Dew, poison for my veins. I can think of 15 different reasons not to drink this, but it's all I've got, so we'll see how well I hold out there. I guess the one consolation prize to all of this, as much as I don't know if my heart's in this, and if I can bring myself to really get through this entire thing, is at least the first thing this hour is really, really good. We're going to be talking about Vengeance of Bane. This is going to be not polished. There's no time to write a thing in an hour. And I know that Metal-Faced Guy said I didn't have to. I would much prefer to be writing these. We're going to try this, as ridiculous as this is going to look. because I have horrible eyesight and I can't see this, but I don't think these are gonna stay on my face. So, and yeah, it's probably not gonna work out. I'm super nearsighted, and that is just not near enough. So I guess for me, going to work is going to mean taking off the mask because of my unfortunate handicap. At least I'm not having to review these in 3D. Okay, Vengeance of Bane, a 64-page special, as it says right there on the cover, that came out in 1993, written by Chuck Dixon, with art by Graham Nolan, and coloring by Eduardo Barreto. This was a book that I don't think DC printed enough of. It is pretty sought after and worth quite a bit more than a lot of the rest of Knightfall, if you can get a first edition copy now, because people didn't get the memo, didn't realize how important Bane was going to be. This was people's introduction to Bane. This may read a little bit like a prequel matter for a character that is really popular, letting you know how he got to be the guy that you know. But this was actually how people that picked this up first even found out about this character, as far as I know, if memory serves. No time to do research or any internet access for this show either. I have read this before. It's been a while. This is one of my absolute favorite one-shots. It's spectacular. The art is brilliant. It holds up really surprisingly well. Unlike some of the other Knightfall matter, there's some kind of, odd dated dialogue here and there and stuff. Very little of that here, except for maybe when we get toward the end with some of the stuff with Batman and the cops. But all the stuff in the prison holds up really well. I think more or less this could have been written yesterday, and it wouldn't surprise anybody. So as I said, this chronicles the early days of Bane and really parallels Bane to Batman, and gives you a sense of how good of a foil this character is for our protagonist, and why he's going to be worthy to, as a brand new character, to be the guy who breaks Batman's back. This is kind of Batman's doomsday to Superman. He's not going to kill Batman, but he's going to be a brand new character that takes Batman out of the equation for a while, just like Doomsday did with Superman, and arguably Bane deserves it quite a bit more. We could talk about the ways in which Doomsday is also an opposite and a foil for Superman, but he's basically just a massive plot device. And Bane, we are introduced to through a character study, which is fascinating and so smart on the part of Chuck Dixon. And I think this is some of Dixon's best writing, at least of what I've read. We open with an uprising in South America. We find out that Bane was taken to a prison in Santa Prisca as a baby and raised there. He's being punished for the crimes of his father, who was part of said uprising, and he and his mother have to go to this prison, and he's raised there. And we get a sense of, and this is, right away, this is really relatable and believable to me, because we get the sense of innocence and childhood from Bane, where this is a guy, and by the way, he doesn't have a name before he's Bane. He's just this child that later on is going to take on that name because of the way he loses his innocence and grows up. And he doesn't know any different being raised in this prison. He thinks this is just the world. This is just how it is. And it will be circumstances and the way he's treated that brings him to become the foil for Batman and losing his innocence, not really having a childhood. He's got a teddy bear. It's really his only toy. That's going to be the symbol of innocence for this book. That's going to come back later in a really significant way. His mother is a really sympathetic and sad and tragic character who is doing her level best to raise him here, but eventually she's just going to give up the ghost. This is the page that really gives you the sense of the prison as a playground for Bane, where he just runs around and has a good time, and this is obviously no place for a child, and you know, outside in, we see this as horrible, but he doesn't until bad things start to happen to him. She, as I said, just can't go on living. She can't stand to be cooped up the way she is and trying to raise a child this way. She was from a farm, and the line is she could not survive hidden from the sun. And that's, of course, a really famous Bane thing that's used in Dark Knight Rises, that he was born in the darkness, he was molded by it. This is a man who, a boy and then a man who never sees the sun until he finally gets out. And eventually we'll see he wasn't ever even supposed to get out. Of course, I mean, he was supposed to stay in this prison his whole life, but he's not even going to break out in a conventional way. He's in several places he's intended to be dead by the warden and the people who run this prison, and he will find a way to survive, and Bane is, of course, very much a survivor. Right away, we have an interesting parallel with Bruce Wayne, where Bane loses his parents, but he doesn't have the childhood that Bruce does. He doesn't have a male role model. Really interesting that he'll become such a tough guy, having had no good male influences. And his mother leaves him at a very early age. And so a lot of mirroring with Bruce Wayne. Obviously, not just brought up in squalor, but brought up with absolutely nothing whatsoever, versus Bruce Wayne, who is raised in a really rich and enriched environment. So there's this really awful warden that will, to nobody's surprise, get his comeuppance later on after Bane grows up. He's being bullied by this guy in the prison who wants to use him to kind of fetch stuff for him because he's small and he can get easily into hard-to-reach places, and Bane doesn't want anything to do with him. I should mention, by the way, that we're also establishing the characters that will become Bane's henchmen later. So Bane's going to come back to the prison right after he gets out of it to liberate these guys and give them a sense of loyalty so that they'll stick around and help him when he goes to Gotham and takes it upon himself to try to wrestle Gotham away from Batman. We meet Trog here, who's going to be one of those guys and who helps him against this scary bully guy. We've already met one early on, and that is Zombie, who we don't know a whole lot about. He's basically, for the sake of this narrative, like Bane's Watson, where he's writing the narrative and the entire thing is from his perspective. Really nice sense of POV in this book. We never get away from him, even when we get to Gotham. There are a couple of scenes that I'm not sure he could actually be there for to chronicle, but I like that we never jump away from his perspective, and he's, of course, our eyes in character, but he's not the protagonist of the piece, and I think Bane is made more sympathetic and believable through him because we understand why he cares so much for Bane. And of course, sympathetic, as I always say, does not mean likable. This is the origin and a character study of clearly a villain, but he is a character where I understand how he got to be where he is, and I feel bad for him, even if I don't condone really any of the horrible things that he does. So this is just an absolutely heart-wrenching page. We're kind of paralleling, I think, the death of Bruce Wayne's parents more here than we are when his mother dies. You see the kind of circle of light surrounding him when he's lying there with his teddy bear, and the blood is there. I think that is invoking the death of Bruce Wayne's parents as we see it in things like things like Batman Year One. I'm a little bit distracted by Spawn Year constantly playing right next to me, which was not my idea. I can't turn it off. I'm being forced to have that in the background. But at the same time, I'm fine with the Spawn Year because it reminds me of how bad it used to be, and I'd rather be doing this, I guess, than that. It certainly could be worse. Then things start to get a little bit strange, and this is kind of my one real criticism about the story in this book, or at least it's a reservation, because I'm kind of confused about it. So Bane is visited in a vision as he seems to be dying and he will survive, spoiler alert, by a future version of himself. And this is the Bane who has overcome all of this adversity and become the paragon of humanity. And the question is it supposed to just be what he hopes that he is? Is it just his mind coping and compensating and figuring out how to survive in this horrendous environment? Or is there something supernatural going on here? Is there something celestial? I really don't know, but it's a little bit odd. I'm kind of okay with the older Bane, the young Bane wants to be, and then he gets there. That's not really my problem with it, but the reason that I imagine that it could be supernatural in some way is because there is a big giant bat that is the personification of his fears, just like the bat is Bruce Wayne's fear. But there aren't any bats in the prison that Bane deals with. He's not afraid of anything, really. And so the bat is not the symbol of his fear in the same way it is for Batman. It's a symbol of becoming fear in the first place. And if it doesn't have anything to do with Batman, I think it is massively coincidental that that's what the symbol ends up being. And right at the end of this, he's going to go to Gotham and he's going to try to study Batman and then, of course, defeat Batman and take over because he sees Batman as the ruler of Gotham City and he wants to be that. He wants to take that away from him and prove that he has more of what it takes than Batman does, which is going to be really interesting. The problem is, I don't know why there's a bat in this vision unless it's somehow supernatural, and it is incredibly ambiguous. So now Bane has transformed. He has become at least kind of a proto-Bane at this point. He's going to need to go through a lot of physical trials and basically go through a 10-year hell, and I love that it's 10 years, just like Bruce Wayne does in order to become Batman. And both of them put themselves through that hell. The ways in which these characters are the same but different is really interesting. And I should say, a lot of Batman's rogues gallery are foils for Batman and kind of Batman's opposites and a mirror for him. But interestingly, most of them represent a specific aspect of Batman's personality or his modus operandi, and Bane is kind of everything in a package. Bane is the only villain that I can think of that has such an interesting history that is paralleled to Batman. Bane is going to kill this guy who was after him, and I really like all the visual storytelling in this book. I like the panel there on the bottom right where you just see some blood and that stupid ring thing that's coming out of this guy's face. I would think that when you're in prison, that would be a thing you wouldn't want to have, because if somebody's really mad at you, they can just yank it off your face, and then that can happen to you. But a lot of things that are implied and made really clear in panels that he doesn't have to explicitly come out and tell you about. So Bane is going to be thrown by the warden into this hole. He's going to be called an animal, and basically it's expected that he will die very quickly. And the warden says, I want hair on his chest before we let him out. I don't think it's expected that he will survive, but he does for 10 years, and he subsists on eating rats, and this is the really messed up part about this for me, is that every day his cell is flooded by water, and he has to rise up to the top and in order to breathe, but this is how he gets a lot of his food also. It's not just rats. He gets nourishment through fish and other seafood that comes through, and then he comes to actually really appreciate having to do this every day because of how much it's teaching him about survival. And then we also, because like I said, this is a good character study, we also get into the psychology of this, into his head. How does he keep his sanity? You could argue that he doesn't. You could argue that he does kind of through all of this become an insane person, but that's all maybe a matter of perspective. Bane keeps keeps centered. He manages to continue to be driven and have a purpose through self-meditation. This is a guy who is completely self-educated, and he teaches himself to do everything, and arguably that's why he's so good at everything he accomplishes, because he has to in order to make it. If he didn't get that good, he would have been dead. And so he's able to teach himself everything. For the most part, I mean, he can't read yet, which makes a lot of sense. Eventually, Bird or Zombie one, I think maybe Zombie, is going to, I forget, is going to teach him how to read. And so he does have to get some help here and there, but for the most part, he accomplishes everything on his own. With the big exception of Venom, and we'll get there because I'm of two minds about that whole thing. We've got this really cool nightmare imagery and kind of just, you know, surreal otherworldly imagery whenever he kind of recedes into himself and goes into another world in his mind. And once again, there he's hunting this big bat creature, but that's how he keeps himself alive, because you'd have, and you know, saying, you'd have crushing boredom, as the book says, and I really like that Dixon thought to deal with that whole thing, and it makes it more believable. He finally manages to get out, and after 10 years, he's released, but not because he accomplished anything and the warden is really impressed with him, but because he's really hoping that Bane will get murdered by the people who, you know, got along with and cared about the guy that he killed. And that doesn't end up happening because, and this is one of the most important parallels with Batman, he is now a legend. So he's then going to meet Bird, who is, in my mind, kind of Bane's Robin. And of course, you know, his name is Bird, and he ends up being Bane's big sidekick. And Bane, I think, teaches Bird a lot, but Bird also teaches Bane a lot. And I guess it is him that teaches him to read, not Zombie. Yeah, that's what it is. And then, and this reminds me a little bit of Shawshank Redemption, Bane is going to go to the prison, to the prison library, and that's how he's going to educate himself and learn a lot. He also has to build his body, of course, continually, as well as his mind. By the way, this is one of my favorite panels in the book, even though I still feel weird about the whole bat thing. He's now learned about Batman, and he's kind of taken that imagery and superimposed it on top of Batman, now that he knows about this the creature of the night that seems to be running things in Gotham. And so he asked Trog, because Trog mentions Gotham, says it's the greatest place on Earth, it's where he's trying to get back to. And Bane says, well, who runs Gotham? And he says, well, that's difficult to say. I don't think there's really any one group or gang that runs Gotham, because they're all scared of Batman. So because of that, I guess I have to say the answer is Batman. And so he says, well, I will go there, and I will defeat Batman, and I will prove that I'm the paragon. Then there is a prison riot, and Bane murders a whole lot of people and gets himself even more on the warden's bad list. And so then it's decided that Bane is going to be the next experimental subject, which reminds me a lot of kind of Holocaust stuff. It's real screwed up, where they keep accidentally killing guys that they're trying to turn into super soldiers, essentially, with the Venom drug, which is a thing that we first got in comics in a book called Venom, not to be confused with the symbiote in Spider-Man. which was written by Denny O'Neil, who we're going to see come back in Knightfall as we move along. He actually ultimately ends up really liking that he's got venom in his system. And it's going to help him to, accomplish things physically that he couldn't otherwise. He gets super strong anytime he pumps himself up full of venom. Eventually, his henchmen are going to help him put together the system of tubes and things that let him, pump himself up with venom, which is, of course, kind of in allegory for steroids, and it also it increases his adrenaline, his drive, and even expands his mind whenever he's on that. Even though very often he looks like real monsterish whenever he gets on venom, but apparently it's supposed to stimulate his mind as well. The thing I've always been a little bit weird about with that, in this book specifically, is that Bane prides himself on being completely self-reliant, on not really needing anybody else. And the idea that he would be cool with being drug addicted is a little bit strange to me. I do like it thematically, though. Like, I feel like Bane might look at it a little bit differently than he does. I guess that's my other reservation on top of the was that a celestial dream or not question. It is the stand-in for Batman's gadgetry, I think, thematically. So Batman can't accomplish everything he does on his own because just with mind over matter, just willpower, because he is, of course, only a man, and he's in denial about that. He's constantly pushing his limits. He doesn't want to believe he has any limits. What I like about Bane is that he's also pushing his limits too, but he seems to be a little bit more aware of his limits than Batman is, maybe. So that might be why he's okay with Venom, but I wouldn't think, the idea that he would need something to make himself stronger might make sense, but being okay with being a slave to a drug addiction is what's strange about that whole thing to me. So ultimately, he's gonna get, I believe, to get killed. The Warden throws his body, just like his mother's body was thrown, by the way, in with the sharks. And Bane, of course, survives, and he gets out of there, and he beats down a shark, which is just awesome. And then, this is how, B.A. Bane is. The first thing he does when they think that he's dead and he escapes prison is he just beats down a shark. He doesn't jump the shark, he beats the crap out of a shark. And then, again, instead of just escaping, he goes back for his friends, and now they're loyal to him forever. Which is also, now that I'm thinking about it, a really interesting parallel with Batman, because Batman doesn't tend to create that kind of loyalty with his sidekicks. He has much more of a my way or the highway kind of attitude and mentality with them. I guess you could make the argument that he does sometimes, save his sidekicks from particular situations and is, a role model for them. But Bane, at least at the start here, seems to have kind of a different attitude, maybe, than Batman with his henchmen. Not to say that they're equals or anything, but I guess we'll have to see as we go along, but he seems like maybe even he is a little bit more loyal to his henchmen as they are loyal to him than perhaps Batman sometimes feels with his own sidekicks. So I don't know if I'm right about that, but we'll see as we move along. So this is a really important page. Bane has, again, that teddy bear that was the symbol of innocence, and now the teddy bear is being thrown out at the same time as he is killing the Warden. The shark is going to get to the Warden, which is poetic justice. I like that the teddy bear has a band-aid on it, because ultimately, like Bane, it could not be fixed. Bane really never got to have a proper childhood, and nobody really nurtured him. And so you have this teddy bear that's got stuffing out of the top of his head. He's got a little band-aid on the front of him, but he was never healed. And then Bane is gonna go to Gotham, And I didn't talk earlier about how he's named Bane, but it's pretty organic. Very early on, after he kills that guy, somebody uses that word describing him, and then Zombie just says, and then it's stuck. I think the image of Bane just watching television is unintentionally amusing. And then we get Bane's Luchador Mask. And immediately, it's very striking, I think, and kind of a cool perversion in a way of the Batman mask. It covers his entire face. It's got red eyes instead of white eyes, like he's constantly, out for blood. And I even like the idea that Bane is so confident and strong and again kind of BA that he doesn't even need a shirt. He just wears a muscle shirt. Batman's all padded and armored, and Bane's like, yeah, all I need is myself, and a drug addiction that turns me into the Hulk whenever I need it. This is a page that always sticks with me. Just this cool full page spread where Bane is kind of asserting himself for the first time. He's going after a mob boss in order to draw Batman out into the open, and this guy seems almost like a Dick Tracy villain. He's got that like metal nose that he could strike a match on if he wanted to. Really classic panel of Batman at the bottom of this. This book is not about Batman. You're almost surprised when you finally get to him, but I'm really glad that he appears in this book and that he and Bane meet each other for the first time here, again, because the character study is so much through the lens of my understanding of Batman. And I like that he's not constantly paralleled in the narrative. That's all implied and stuff that I understand knowing what I know about Batman. That's my Batman. That's my color scheme. I love the circle. I love the gray. I think Norm Breyfogle draws it the best, and I'm excited because we're going to get to see some of that here in Knightfall. Some really cool panel layouts in this book as well. I really like the triangle thing going on at the top. I'm not going to be pretentious enough to try to read any kind of thematic thing into that. I think it just looks cool and it's inventive. The coloring in this book is wonderful. Everything really pops, and then I love how kind of moody and stylistic it gets in this sequence. Almost kind of a film noir kind of thing. Batman's going to get his first glimpse of Bane, and it's a wonderfully intense moment. We're going to have this exchange where Bane says, someday soon you will know my name. But he doesn't tell him his name yet, and he says, when you do know it, you will scream my name. And I'm interested to see, going back to this material, because again, I've not read every issue, and it's been a lot of years, the stuff that I have read. I know the overarching story of Knightfall from reading the novelization and things, but getting it in really rapid succession like this is going to be really cool. I'm curious to see if that pays off the way I'm hoping that it does. I love the way that he draws Batman's cowl. All the shadow work is spectacular. I like Batman using these tools that Bane doesn't seem to need. He's got the almost like detective vision thing going on. It's also kind of interesting that in this, Montoya is the one who says, oh no, Batman seems to be a murderer. Like right away, Bane is framing Batman, and it's Montoya that says, oh no, it looks like he's finally crossed the line and gone too far, and it's Bullock that says, that's not his MO, surely it wasn't him. And I'm not saying they're out of character, because Montoya does bring that up and call him on it. He's like, really, you of all people are taking up for Batman? And he's like, well, it just doesn't line up. But I do think it's a little bit weird that Montoya jumps the gun the way she does there. That tie that Bullock is wearing is just absolutely ludicrous, and it looks like something that Sam Burke would wear in Spawn. But I think that that's a character that's maybe influenced a little bit, of course, by this character. At least we don't have to see him really messily eat a jelly donut and get it all over the place, because that's disgusting. And then this really provocative panel at the end, Bane with the fire in his eyes. That's going to be kind of foreshadowing for tearing down Batman's world, but also for what happens to Arkham here pretty soon after this. And I just like the explanation that we get here, because it's wonderfully organic and doesn't feel like a cop-out where we're just trying to stretch for time, where Bane explains, I could bring Batman down right now if I wanted to, but I need to understand him because he doesn't kill, and I don't understand that. I think that's really interesting. Bane says, you know, me being the paragon that I am, I do whatever is necessary. Kind of like Ra's al Ghul from Batman Begins. I do all that is necessary. And Batman has somehow brought this city, it feels, to its knees, and he's compassionate, and he cares about people. And the mob boss earlier that almost died, Batman grabs and tries to save, and Bane says, I don't get that. And he says, I want to understand Batman before I take over the city, because the city is an extension of Batman, which is a theme that we deal with a lot in Batman stories. Where does Gotham and Batman begins? He has influenced the city so much. You've got so much escalation because of the way Batman handles criminals and stuff that Gotham feels synonymous with Batman, and that's an interesting meta-commentary because, of course, it is. In the literature, Gotham only exists because Batman exists, so we play with that inside of the fictional narrative. And Bane says, I need to get this guy before I can get this city, and that's why he doesn't kill him right away, and why he's going to study him and learn about him, and how we get away with making Knightfall as lengthy as it is before we get to essentially the first act plot point of, spoiler alert, Bane breaking Batman's back. Anyway, that is Knightfall. Or excuse me, it's not all of Knightfall. I wish it was. We'd be finished, and I could go home, right upstairs to my family. It's so strange trying to do this kind of analysis, having no idea what's going on with what I'm pretty sure is a clone of me pretending to be me upstairs. I had to rush read this. I spent 40 minutes out of an hour reviewing this. This is going to be so difficult. But I've got to stop now so that I can get into my next hour, and so that this will count, and so that I don't lose all of my stuff and my livelihood. So now, I'm going to have to decide if I'm going to play things more like Batman and rely on myself, but also the technology at my disposal, or if I'm going to rely on a substance. Well, I'll see you in an hour.